What kind of prayer shakes nations? What kind of prayer makes hell tremble and heaven open? John Wesley declared that prayer is the fire that sets the world ablaze. Without prayer, the church is cold. With prayer, it becomes unstoppable. This message is a wake-up call. Not all prayers carry fire, but those born out of brokenness and faith ignite movements that change history. The fire of revival always descends on the altar of prayer. Write in the comments, "I want the prayer that sets the world on fire." Subscribe now, like this video, and share it so that others may also be ignited by the flame of God.
For Wesley, prayer was not a formality, not a checkbox in a daily routine, and not a pious decoration for the religious. Prayer was life itself. He often described prayer as the very breath of the soul. Just as the body gasps and dies without air, the Christian who ceases to pray suffocates spiritually. To pray is to breathe heaven's atmosphere. To neglect prayer is to invite spiritual death. A prayerless believer may still look religious on the outside. They may attend services, participate in rituals, and even speak eloquently about God. But Wesley warned that without prayer there is no true power, no vitality, no flame of heaven burning within. A believer without prayer is like a lamp without oil, a branch cut off from the vine, a soldier without strength. Prayer is the lifeline that connects the soul to divine strength, the channel through which God's grace flows continuously into the human heart. The secret of the prayer that sets the world on fire begins here, realizing that prayer is not optional but essential. It is the difference between spiritual life and spiritual death, between fire and coldness, between victory and defeat. Neglect prayer and you cut off the very source of life, leaving only an empty shell of religion without the presence of God. Not every prayer rises with fire before the throne of God. Wesley taught that heaven is not moved by mechanical words, by hollow repetition, or by eloquence without substance. What touches God's heart is sincerity, urgency, and faith. The prayer that shakes heaven is not birthed in ritual, but in desperation. The prayer that sets the world ablaze is the cry of a soul undone before God. It is the whisper of a broken heart, the groan too deep for words, the tear-stained petition of one who knows they cannot live without Him. This kind of prayer does not remain on earth. It ascends like fire, igniting heaven itself. Wesley believed that when the church recovers this kind of prayer, the world cannot remain the same. When a believer prays with faith, doors swing open that no man can shut, chains fall from captives, and God's will breaks forth into history. This prayer has power, not because of the person who prays, but because of the God who answers. It is prayer rooted in His promises, aligned with His will, and fueled by His Spirit. This is the prayer that calls down revival fire. Prayer without holiness is powerless, like an arrow without a tip or a flame without fuel. Wesley preached that true prayer demands a life separated unto God. One cannot hope to pray with fire while clinging to sin, because sin quenches the Spirit and blocks the flow of divine power. Holiness is not the enemy of prayer. It is the atmosphere in which prayer thrives. The altar of prayer is also the altar of purification. Every time we kneel before God, His presence acts like fire that exposes hidden motives, burns away impurities, and refines our lives in holiness. In prayer, masks fall, pretenses dissolve, and the soul is stripped bare before the Holy One. Prayer is not simply asking for blessings, it is surrendering to transformation. The prayer that sets the world on fire must first burn within us. It is prayer that purifies the heart, reshapes the will, and reorients the desires of the soul. It consumes pride, selfishness, and compromise, making us vessels fit for God's power. Before prayer can transform nations, it must transform the intercessor into a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable before the Lord. Wesley insisted with passion that prayer is not leisure, not routine, but war. On our knees, we do not enter a place of passivity. We enter the battlefield of eternity where destinies are decided. The prayer closet is not a quiet retreat, but the war room where heaven's armies are summoned and hell's gates are assaulted. Through prayer, demons are driven out, strongholds collapse, and schemes of darkness are overturned. Each intercession is like a flaming arrow piercing the shadows, each cry a trumpet blast that shakes spiritual realms. The devil does not fear our preaching if it lacks prayer. He does not fear our songs if they are sung without fire. But he trembles at the sound of genuine prayer rising from a consecrated heart. The prayer that sets the world on fire is forged in the furnace of battle. It is prayer that confronts the enemy head-on, resists temptation with divine strength, and calls down the authority of heaven to invade earth. This prayer does not retreat, it advances. It does not yield to fear, it stands in faith. And it is in this place of warfare that the believer discovers the full weight of God's power unleashed through prayer.
Every true revival in history began with prayer. From the days of the Moravians to the awakenings of England and America, the fire of God always fell where hearts were bowed in prayer. Revival does not begin in pulpits or conferences, but in hidden rooms where men and women groan before God. Tears on the floor become sparks that ignite entire nations. A prayerless church will never see revival. But where there is prayer, even dry bones live again, and the fire of God spreads like wildfire. The prayer that sets the world ablaze is not whispered once and abandoned. It perseveres. Wesley often taught that many stop praying too soon, just before the answer comes. Persevering prayer is faith that refuses to give up. It continues even when the heavens feel silent, even when nothing changes, because it trusts the character of God. This is the prayer that wears down resistance, that storms heaven's gates, and that eventually brings breakthrough. Fire falls not on casual prayer, but on persistent, unrelenting intercession. The greatest miracle of prayer is not only that it changes circumstances, but that it changes the one who prays. Wesley emphasized that every time we bend the knee, God reshapes us into His likeness. Prayer refines the soul, strengthens the faith, and aligns our will with the will of heaven. In prayer, selfish desires are burned away, and holy desires are born. The prayer that sets the world on fire first sets the believer on fire. Before it shakes nations, it shakes the heart of the intercessor. John Wesley understood this truth. Prayer is the fire that sets the world ablaze, not polished words, not empty rituals, but hearts surrendered, holy and persevering before God. This is the call. Return to the altar, recover the fire, and let prayer once again become the furnace where revival is birthed. Without prayer, the church is powerless. With prayer, the church is unstoppable. If this word touched your heart, write in the comments, "I want the prayer that sets the world on fire." Make it your public declaration that you will seek God in prayer. Subscribe, share this sermon, and remember, The world will only burn with God's fire when the church prays with God's power.